The hall of the Red Keep smelled of blood and sweat. Ned Stark stood over the body of Seer Barristan Selmy, who was trying to calm the madness around him, but it was too late. The clashing of swords still echoed from outside. Jaime Lannister had been caught during his reckless attack on Ned's men. He'd drawn his blade like a cornered lion, arrogant as ever, slicing through Stark guards before being overwhelmed. Now he was on his knees, blood dripping from his mouth, his golden hair tangled and dirtied from battle. Ned's eyes didn't soften. He remembered the broken body of Jory Castle, lying in a pool of blood, a man who had followed him since Winterfell. He remembered the way Jaime had smirked when he'd attacked him in the streets, unprovoked, like honor meant nothing. Ned's knuckles clenched around the pommel of ice, his greatsword. Lord Renly, younger brother to the king, stepped forward nervously. "Lord Stark, this is the Queen's brother." Ned didn't answer right away. He looked down at Jaime. "You murdered my men in cold blood. You drew steel against the hand of the king." Jaime spat blood, grinning despite his state. "I killed your men because they were stupid enough to follow a northern fool into Lion's Den." Ned said nothing. His silence was heavy, and words hung in the air like poison. Renly shifted uneasily. "We must take him prisoner, not execute a Lannister in front of the court. The king is off whoring somewhere in the city," Ned interrupted, his voice cold as winter. "And this man has shed the blood of the realm without cause. Cersei wasn't there. She had gone to the countryside with her children days ago. Robert was drunk somewhere. There was no one to stop him, no one to hide behind power. For the first time in a long while, Ned made a choice, not for peace, but for justice," said Jaime Lannister. "You were sentenced to death for treason, for murder, and for attacking the hand of the king," Ned declared. His voice carried through the hall like thunder. "May the gods have mercy on your soul." The room exploded in protest. Renly stepped back in disbelief. Some knights drew swords in confusion, unsure if they should act. But ice was already raised. Jaime, still smirking, stared into Ned's eyes. "Do it, Stark. At least I won't die a coward." And then, with one swift stroke, Ned Stark ended the Kingslayer's life. What followed was silence, but it wasn't peace. It was the calm before a storm. Within hours, ravens flew from King's Landing to Casterly Rock. Tywin Lannister received the news with a stone face, but those around him saw it. His rage was volcanic. His golden lion had been slain by a Stark, a public execution. No trial, no courtesy. In the Red Keep, Robert Baratheon returned drunk and laughing, until he learned what Ned had done. His laughter died immediately. "You killed Jaime Lannister without my leave," he growled, face red with fury. "You think yourself king now?" Ned stood firm. "He attacked my men. He murdered Jory. Justice had to be done." Robert shook his head, betrayed. "You may have just started a war." "I did what was right," Ned replied, but deep inside, even he felt the ground shifting. And shift it did, in the shadows. Varys and Littlefinger whispered. Cersei screamed when she heard the news. Tyrion, far away in the Vale, went cold with dread. The lion had been struck down, not in battle, not in war, but in the capital, by the hand of honor itself. And across Westeros, banners started to rise. Tywin Lannister stared into the fire at Casterly Rock, his golden goblet untouched beside him. The letter from King's Landing lay open in his hand. The words burned into his mind. Said Jaime Lannister, executed by Lord Eddard Stark. Just like that. No trial, no warning, no royal command. The servants dared not speak. The silence of the chamber was heavier than steel. Tywin's face was emotionless, but those who knew him, truly knew him, could see the fury boiling beneath. Jaime, his golden son, his heir, his pride, killed like a dog in the capital. He didn't shout, he didn't curse. He simply stood and said one sentence: "Summon the bannermen." The Lannister army moved like a flood. Tywin sent ravens across the Westerlands, calling every loyal house. Within days, 15,000 men began marching east, toward the Riverlands first, toward blood. Back in King's Landing, Robert Baratheon was lost in a storm of wine and guilt. He slammed goblets against the wall, cursing Ned, cursing Tywin, cursing himself. He was the Queen's brother. He roared, "You don't just kill a Lannister like that and expect peace." But Ned stood his ground. "He killed my men in your streets. I warned you of his madness. I did what had to be done." "You did what you wanted," Robert spat, "not what the realm needed." Tywin is marching now, and this time he's not coming to parley. In the shadows, Cersei moved like a spider. Her grief for Jaime was cold and sharp, like a blade kept close to the skin. But her fury was far greater. With Jaime gone, her only concern now was power and vengeance. She whispered in her son's ear, planted seeds in the court. "The North cannot be trusted," she told anyone who would listen. "They want the throne. Ned Stark just proved it." Tyrion, still held by Catelyn Stark in the Vale, received the news from a trembling servant. For the first time in his life, his smirk faded. "They killed him," he said, disbelief in his voice. "Ned Stark actually did it." He stared out the window. "My father's going to burn the Riverlands for this." And he was right. Lord Tywin began his campaign not by heading straight for the capital, but by sending Gregor Clegane, the mountain, into the Riverlands, torching villages, killing peasants, daring House Tully to respond. It was bait, and Hoster Tully bit. Edmure called the banners, and with that, the Riverlands were aflame. Back in the north, Robb Stark received his father's raven. He read it in the great hall of Winterfell, his jaw tightening with every word. "War," he whispered. "They'll come for father next." Maester Luwin tried to reason with him. "Peace may still be possible." "You are young. I'm a Stark of Winterfell," Robb said. "And they've started a war over Lannister pride. If the lions want blood, they'll get it, but they'll pay for every drop." He sent ravens north and south, east and west. The banners of the north were raised at the wall. Jon Snow heard whispers of war, his thoughts heavy with fear. He wanted to ride to his father, to help. But he was a man of the Night's Watch now. He had taken the oath. Still, he stood atop the wall and looked south, his fists clenched. "The realm is falling apart," he said to Sam, "and my family is." In the middle of it, Sam, pale and anxious, nodded. Do you think war will reach here?" Jon didn't answer. His heart was already miles away in the south, in the chaos. Meanwhile, in the Red Keep, Littlefinger smiled to himself. A lion slain, a wolf in chains, a king unsteady, he murmured. The game begins anew. The death of Jaime Lannister had changed everything. No longer was Westeros held together by fragile peace. Now it was a realm of vengeance, pride, and fire. And in the dark shadowed corners of power, the true game had just begun. The Iron Throne never looked more unstable. Robert Baratheon sat upon it like a bloated corpse, wearing a crown, his eyes sunken, his hands trembling. The court was divided, half in fear of Tywin's wrath, half angry at Ned Stark's defiance. Every whisper in the halls carried poison. The Red Keep had become a den of silent threats. Ned stood before the throne, refusing to bow. He had not come for apologies. "We must prepare the city," he said calmly. "Tywin marches. The Riverlands burn. We need soldiers, provisions, leadership." Robert shook his head slowly. "You don't get it, do you?" he said, voice hoarse. "They don't care about war. They care about pride. You killed Jaime. You didn't just kill a man, you insulted the richest, most powerful house in the realm." "You're the king," Ned said coldly. "You can stop this before it consumes everything." "I'm the king of a drunken kingdom," Robert snapped, "and your northern sense of honor just poured oil on wildfire." In the shadows of the hall, Cersei stood with her children, her eyes locked on Ned with icy hatred. Tommen clung to her, unaware, but Joffrey watched, like a predator learning to kill. He whispered something in Cersei's ear, and she smiled bitterly. Later that night, Cersei met with Grand Maester Pycelle and Petyr Baelish. "The wolf must be dealt with," she said. Quietly, "The king won't act, but I will." Littlefinger leaned forward. "Chaos is a ladder, my queen. If Lord Stark were to slip, there are many who would rise." Across the city, Varys moved silently through the dungeons, his birds whispering of plots and knives. He visited Ned in his chambers, eyes unreadable. "You have made enemies of lions, my lord. Their claws are long, and their teeth sharper than you know." "I made enemies for justice," Ned replied. "I will not apologize for doing what was right." Varys gave a small, almost sad smile. "Right does not win wars. Power does. And right now, power slips through your fingers." Meanwhile, in the Riverlands, Tywin Lannister's army scorched the earth. The mountains' raids left entire villages gutted. Rivers ran red. Edmure Tully tried to fight back, but lacked numbers. Raventree Hall, Fairmarket, and Pink Maiden fell within weeks. Robb Stark rode hard from Winterfell, gathering northern bannermen behind him. The Greatjon, the Karstarks, the Umbers, they all marched south, hungry for war. At Moat Cailin, they paused. "We ride to Riverrun," Robb ordered. "We protect our kin, and if Tywin Lannister wants war, he'll choke on it." Catelyn, still at the Eyrie with her sister Lysa, grew restless. Word from the Riverlands reached her quickly. "My father is under siege," she told Lysa. "My son marches to war, and you sit here hiding behind high walls." Lysa clutched her son tightly. "The Vale does not answer to war. Not for the Starks, not for the Lannisters. We are safe here." "You're a coward," Catelyn said bitterly. "And when the fire spreads, your walls won't save you." Far across the sea, Daenerys Targaryen looked into the flames of her campfire. Viserys had already died at Drogo's hand, and now she carried a child within her, the stallion who would mount the world. Her heart burned with purpose. "Westeros bleeds," Seer Jorah Mormont told her one night. "The realm fractures. When the time comes, you may find allies among their ashes." She touched her belly. "Let them burn each other. When they are done, I will rise from their bones." Back in King's Landing, things moved fast. Ned found a scroll on his table. One night, sealed with wax he didn't recognize. He opened it slowly, expecting treachery. But it was from Stannis Baratheon. "Robert is no true king," it read. "Cersei's children are bastards, born of Jaime Lannister. You know it, I know it. Come to Dragonstone. we must speak. Ned's hands trembled slightly. The truth was a sword even sharper than ice, and if he used it, it could cut the realm in half. Ned Stark stared at the letter from Stannis long into the night. The fire crackled softly, but the words in that scroll roared, louder than any blaze. He had suspected it, yes, but now it was written, confirmed, undeniable. Joffrey, Tommen, and Myrcella were not Robert's children. They were Jaime's bastards. The truth was poison, and yet it was also a sword. Sharp, dangerous. Dawn came, but Ned found no peace with it. He met with Renly Baratheon first, hoping. For since they are not Robert's heirs, Ned said plainly, the line of succession is broken. Stannis is the rightful king. Renly laughed, bitter and loud. Stannis, the coldest man alive. No one follows Stannis, Ned. The people want a king they can rally behind. I don't care what they want, Ned said. I care what is right. Then you'll die with your honor, Renly snapped, while the realm burns. Littlefinger, always lurking nearby, leaned into Ned's ear later that evening. You want the truth to matter in a city of lies. You're a northern fool. I will not play games, Ned said firmly. You already are, Littlefinger whispered, smiling. You just haven't realized you're losing. Still, Ned sent out letters to Stannis, 2 key lords across the realm, revealing the secret of Cersei's children. He moved with caution but urgency. He knew the moment the Queen found out, his life would be in danger, but it was already too late. Varys tried to warn him. You've drawn blood, Lord Stark. Now you wave a sword of truth, thinking it will protect you. But in King's Landing, truth is often a death sentence. The next morning, Robert Baratheon returned from a boar hunt mortally wounded. His body was torn, blood-soaked, and his breath came in gasps. Ned stood at his side, grief and shock clenching his chest. Who did this? Robert's voice was weak. It was the wine, too much, and the beast. He grabbed Ned's hand. Tightly, you were right. About her, about everything. Protect my children. Protect the realm. Ned's eyes flickered. Your children, they are not yours. Robert looked away, as if he already knew. Then protect the realm from them. With a final breath, the king was dead. The silence that followed was short-lived. Chaos took its place. Cersei moved first. She seized the throne room, posted Lannister guards at every entrance. Ned arrived with Robert's will in hand, naming him protector of the realm. But Cersei tore it apart in front of the court. You have no power here, she said coldly. You killed my brother. Now you want my son's crown. Ned turned to the lords. Joffrey is not the king's son. He has no right to the throne. Gasps echoed. Swords were drawn, but the gold cloaks, whom Ned thought were loyal, turned. On him, Littlefinger stepped forward, dagger in hand. I warned you not to trust me. The betrayal was swift and brutal. Ned's men were cut down. Ned himself was taken, bloodied but alive, thrown into the dungeons beneath the Red Keep, and above, Joffrey Baratheon sat on the Iron Throne, his smirk the same as his real father's. Cersei ruled through him. The Lannisters had won the first move. Word of Ned's imprisonment spread fast. Robb Stark, now at the twins' negotiating passage with Walder Frey, clenched the letter in his hand until his knuckles turned white. They've taken my father, he said through gritted teeth. Now we march to war. The River Lords rallied. Behind him, Catelyn finally escaped the Vale and rode to join her son. In the west, Tywin prepared for a siege. In the east, Stannis read Ned's letter and sharpened his blade, and across the sea, Daenerys watched her unborn child kick, as if feeling the pulse of a dying kingdom. Calling for rebirth, the realm was cracking, and the war for the crown had truly begun. Chains clinked softly as Ned Stark sat in the damp darkness of the black cells. The cold stone bit into his bones, and the stink of rot and despair never left. Yet even here, the weight on his chest wasn't from the cold or the chains, it was from the faces of his daughters, the howl of war he could almost hear from the distant north, and the truth he had tried to bring into the light. He thought of Robert, dying with regret. He thought of Jory Castle, loyal and dead. And he thought of Jon Snow, beyond the wall, never knowing what fate had befallen his father. One day, Varys came with soft steps and whispers. "Your daughter begs for your life, Lord Stark." Cersei listens, to no one, except perhaps the crowd. "If you confess treason, falsely or not, she may let you live." Ned looked up, his face worn but his eyes still sharp. "You want me to lie? To bow before a false king? Before the woman who murdered Robert?" Varys sighed. "I want you to live. Your death gains nothing. Your honor will not feed your children." Ned didn't respond. He stared into the darkness. Outside the dungeon, King's Landing seethed. Whispers of rebellion and betrayal ran like fire. The city had turned tense, quiet like a storm building. Sansa, under Lannister control, wept daily, begging the Queen for mercy. Arya was gonna vanished, last seen near the stables, and in the Riverlands war had come. Robb Stark crossed the Twins with the reluctant blessing of Walder Frey, in exchange for safe passage. Robb promised one of his siblings in marriage. He didn't flinch. He was no longer just a boy of 16. He was a commander now, hardened by betrayal. At Riverrun, the Stark and Tully banners flew high together. Edmure Tully prepared the walls for siege. Catelyn arrived, her eyes hard with grief and rage. She walked into the war council like a woman possessed. "My husband is imprisoned. My daughters are hostages. My brother fights alone. And Tywin Lannister sits untouched in the west. That ends now." Robb ordered 2 forces, one to face Tywin directly in the south, and the other, led by himself, to march west and trap Jaime Lannister's remaining forces. But in this version of events, there was no Jaime to lead. The lion's head was already rotting, and so Tywin fought like a brute instead of a tactician. He sent Gregor Clegane north again, but this time the north was ready. Robb's wolves met the mountain's men on the banks of the Red Fork and left no survivors. The war had turned. The north had learned to bleed, and now it knew how to strike. In Dragonstone, Stannis Baratheon made his move. With Melisandre at his side, he burned idols of the Seven and began gathering ships. The Fire Priestess whispered that the usurper Joffrey had no right, and that Stannis, touched by the Lord of Light, must reclaim the realm. "Only the blood of kings can cleanse the realm of falsehood," she said, "and only your shadow can bring justice to the lion." Stannis didn't believe in gods, but he believed in vengeance. At sea, letters spread like wildfire. Some houses began to murmur discontent with the boy king. Others still feared the Lannister gold. But many remembered Ned Stark's execution, of Jaime, the fall of peace, and the dishonor of the throne. And at the wall, Jon Snow stood upon the frozen battlements. Sam handed him a letter. Jon's hands trembled. "Father is imprisoned. The war begins. Robb rides to save him." Jon looked out into the white wilderness, but his heart burned with heat. He could not march to his family's side, not unless he abandoned his oath. And yet, my family needs me, he whispered. And somewhere in the crypts of Winterfell, the old kings seemed to stir. In King's Landing, the crowd gathered at the Sept of Baelor. Cersei stood tall beside Joffrey. The boy king wore a crown too large for his head and a scowl too cruel for his age. Ned Stark was dragged out, weak and thin. He looked up at the sky, the bells tolled, and he knew that in this game, truth and honor had no place in the power. The square outside the great Sept of Baelor was packed with people, commoners, lords, merchants, and thieves, craning their necks to see the man who had dared to defy the throne. Ned Stark, Lord of Winterfell, Warden of the North, stood on trembling legs, his face pale but proud, the sound of bells echoing like funeral drums. Sansa wept openly beside the queen, her sobs ignored as Cersei watched with calculated silence. Joffrey sat on the Iron Throne's makeshift dais like a petulant god, swinging his feet with impatience. "Confess," the High Septon said solemnly, his voice booming. "Confess, and you shall be shown mercy." Ned's eyes swept over the crowd. He saw no mercy there, only hunger for blood, for justice, for entertainment. King's Landing didn't want truth. It wanted a story. He thought of Arya, who he prayed had escaped, of Robb riding into war, of Bran and Rickon, too young to understand the storm coming, of Jon, far away on a frozen wall, and of Catelyn, his fierce, grieving wife. "I am guilty," Ned said slowly, forcing the words out. His voice cracked, but not from fear, from heartbreak. "I conspired against the crown. I sought to betray the rightful king." Gasps ran through the crowd. Sansa fell to her knees, sobbing harder. Joffrey grinned. "See, even wolves bow before lions." Cersei leaned toward him, her voice a warning. "He's confessed. Let him take the black. Show mercy." But Joffrey's smile twisted into something darker. "No," he said, standing. "He tried to steal my crown. That is treason. My mother would let him live, but I am the king now. And the king's justice must be done." Cersei's eyes went wide. "Joffrey, bring me his head." The square erupted. Sansa screamed. The crowd roared in shock and delight. Seer Ilyn Payne, the silent executioner, stepped forward with Ice Ned's own blade gleaming under. The son Varys moved to speak, but it was too late. Littlefinger didn't blink. The gold cloaks held their line. Ned Stark met death with open eyes. His last thought was of Winterfell, the snow, the quiet, and the voice of his father saying, "The man who passes the sentence should swing the sword." The blade fell. The world changed. News of Ned's execution spread like wildfire. In Riverrun, Catelyn fell to her knees. Robb stared into the fire and didn't speak for hours. Then he stood and said just one thing: "I want the boy king dead." The North roared for vengeance. At the Twins, Robb was declared king in the North, the first in centuries. The Riverlords followed suit. The war for the crown became a war for independence. In the Westerlands, Tywin Lannister smiled faintly. The Starks had walked into war just as he planned, but he hadn't expected the boy king to act so recklessly. Even lions knew better than to kill a captured wolf in front of the realm. In Dragonstone, Stannis raised his banners. The truth of Joffrey's blood had been buried with Ned, but Stannis still held the sword of legitimacy. He now had the Fire and a priestess who whispered of shadows and king's blood in the east. Daenerys gave birth to her son under a red comet, but the child did not live. In his place, she emerged from the funeral pyre with 3 dragons, newborn, and screaming, "The world burns," she said to her people. "Let it burn, I will rise from its ashes." And at the wall, Jon Snow stared northward, haunted by rumors and letters and the image of his father's death. "I swore an oath," he whispered to Sam. "But if the realm falls, what does the wall even protect?" Westeros cracked open, like a fruit left in the sun. The death of Jaime Lannister had shattered the balance. Ned's execution had lit the fire. Now war raged from the icy north to the burning south. Honor was dead, truth was treason, and only power ruled the Game of Thrones.